That's the beauty of our entire community, our entire ecosystem. We're all here to help each other. I can't tell you how excited I am for the three, again, some of my best friends now at this point, to share some of their knowledge on how to build flows, some of the ins and outs. But most importantly, if you haven't joined us on one of these webinars, buckle up because you are in for a treat. We're going to have a great time. Please, please, please. I can already see the chat lighting up right now. Please be interactive. This is for you. Ask questions, call people out, maybe throw some shade at Chris Feza. I don't know what you want to do, but do everything that you want in the chat and have a good time. That's what we're here for. I'm excited. I've got a couple of my really good friends here. Justin, I'm going to let you kick us off and introduce yourself.
Hey, everyone. My name is Justin Gavette, and I am with Scale Matter. Sorry, the chat is distracting me. ADD. So I am the go-to-market tech ops lead at Scale Matters. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 10 years, and I am a big Salesforce nerd, which, if you know me, you already know that. And I even get nerdier when it comes to nonprofits. So that's me.
I love it. Justin, is it 10? Keep me honest, 10 certs? Is that what we're up to now? How many certifications you got?
11 if you count my Scrum Master.
11 certs.
12 if you count Fullerfied.
If you count Fullerfied, that's true. Very prestigious certification. I've known Justin forever. Believe it or not, I think when we started Sonar, Justin was customer number 3, I believe. I had to look back at the count. He's been along a journey with us for a long time. So pumped to have you here, Justin. Man, I don't even know what to do with Eric Lopez right now, but I'm going to turn it over to him and give that introduction and keep those glasses on.
Didn't notice you here. Thank you for coming.
Oh my God.
Eric Lopez here. I've been in the Salesforce space for a bit of time. Big fan of flows and a big fan of talking about this topic. And as a matter of fact, if those of you that may be in Tahoe tomorrow, I'll be talking about this exact same thing, but more in depth in Tahoe. So right now I'm in beautiful Elko, Nevada County Library. Because like I said in the chat, the McDonald's was a little bit too loud, but I'm here for you. And I thank my wife for putting on the lead foot to get me here.
Oh my God, I love it. I have to give Eric a ton of credit. The reason we have STFU, Shut the Flow Up, is that was the title of his presentation at Snowforce, which he was also one of the organizers on. Phenomenal event. If you ever get a chance to go out to Salt Lake City for Snowforce in March, do it. I'll be there. Get to go skiing as well, which is pretty fun. So, Eric, as always, pumped to have you here. Just ready to laugh and cry with you for the next 45, 50 minutes. Certainly, last but not least, good friend Matt Rodriguez. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you.
I'm a consultant with Admin Within, so I've been doing Salesforce work for a few years now and started in sales. So I view this mostly like a video game, to be honest with you. I think my job is, I'm surprised that, Feza's here, so I can't really say this, but I'm surprised I get paid to do it sometimes. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you all about the flow stuff. So it's going to be fun.
Oh, I love it. Feza, please keep paying Matt. You already know how meaningful he is to me, but also to your organization. All jokes aside, I've had the pleasure of working with Matt as a customer a couple times now on the Sonar side, but he's also my go-to. If I got a flow question or if I don't know what I'm doing, Matt's my guy to hit up. So, and of course, a lot of folks know me, but certainly if I have not connected with you yet on LinkedIn, let's be friends. Let's connect and we'll have a good time. It's a great place to obviously follow us on LinkedIn because these three drop a wealth of knowledge on all social platforms. We do our best on Sonar and WizOps to keep up with keep it up. So, all right, Matt, you were going to kick us off. However, as always, let's get a head count real quick. 65 people in here right now. This is great. I'm opening up a poll. We want to hear from you. Are you actually building with flows or not? This is good. Almost too easy of a poll to have, but yeah, we want to hear from you. Are you using them? Are you thinking about using them? Are you going to be an expert after 54 more minutes of this webinar? We hope so. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. That being said, I will tell you, when Matt and I were going through some of the prep yesterday, I couldn't help. I've shared this on LinkedIn and I'll put it on here too. Don't really know how to move everybody off the stage, but we had a hilarious conversation about why are flows the optimal automation in Salesforce. We all have a ton of different flavors, a ton of different priorities, and we all write in a bunch of different ways, right? Some folks are process builder folks. Some folks are workflow rules. Boo, yes. And a lot of people are moving over to flows. That's also been from the guidance that we get from Salesforce themselves. So we've all seen and understand a lot of the alerts that are coming in. But Matt and I were having a great time with the analogy that we posted on LinkedIn yesterday. Look, Christopher Nolan had a great opportunity to use some really crappy CGI way back in when did he do the first Superman? The 70s, maybe 80s. He's not that type of technology now. Of course, they're using new and enhanced technologies. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have to make sure that we communicate to our community, to our customers, to our employees, is that it might be a little scary, it might be a little new, but the power of it and the utility of it is so rewarding to you and your organization. And that's what we're really going to dive into today to better understand how to use them, how to optimize them, how not to use them is another way of thinking about it. But we're going to kick it off with Matt. Why
Yep.
Salesforce is forcing this type of change?
Yeah. So I'll actually go before that. So I got three things I'll cover, but version 0 or number 0 really is that if you're not using Flow today, so if you're still building in Workflow Rule or Process Builder, you are actually just wrong. So kind of like looking at the poll here, there's a few people, and if you're wrong now, you won't be in about 40 minutes. But the big thing really is that Flow is the future in the sense that like it is the most efficient way to do things. And we're going to cover a couple of things here about why the Salesforce change was, or Salesforce is forcing the change. Secondarily, of like what the demo of the migration tool looks like. So I'll actually just go through a migration tool piece with you. And then I'll give some insight into what you should do next about migrating all of your workflow rules and process builders off into Flow. This is pretty relevant right now, specifically because of the changes going to be put for 2024, early 2024. So a lot of people like you're running a business, you're doing a lot of things, and so you don't have time to work on all of the workflow rules and process builders you've put together over the course of years. You could have things that took 6-7 years total to put together, and so unpacking that in 9 months or 6 months now is going to be pretty hard. So we're going to provide some guidance around that there.
Gary,
And
I
it
think,
looks like
Matt, I know
most
the
people
one
use Flow
thing.
too.
Oh yeah, I remember the one thing Matt, you and I were talking about is we look at Salesforce and any org that we're all working in, right? I know you're going to jump into a little bit of the demo of the migration tool, but we look at this, we all know that the current Salesforce instance that we're all operating in, whether it be a customers of ours or an internal org, none of these were created in one day. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? But there's a big challenge ahead of us all that we have to convert all these flows over, all these other automations over to Flow in a relatively short period of time, which can be challenging. Matt, I'll turn it back over to you when you think about how to use the Flow migration tool and some of the ins and outs and maybe even warnings that you have for it.
Yeah. So history. So back in the day, many of us were using workflow rule and process builder. So I've just popped up, a workflow rule spot inside of a trailhead org. All of you have seen this before, but many of you probably have workflow rules that are in the multiple pages with hundreds of workflow rules available. So history there was that at the time when we were building these automations, this was what was best. There was either Apex or there was workflow rules. And then process builder comes out and then it's Apex, workflow rules, or process builder. And now that we have Flow and a better version of it, even it has kind of taken the place of both workflow rules and process builders. So when I think about like these automation pieces themselves and like the history of why Salesforce is doing this change, workflow rules are like single node before save flows, or I think they call them like fast field changes or something now. And process builders are multiple decision point after save flows. So Salesforce, when you do this migrator tool, and we'll show it in a second, but when you do it, all it's really doing is uncovering to you what's under the hood of what's actually already going on with the automation. And it's not functionally changing very much. So if workflow rules and process builders are basically just very low technology flows, there's no reason to have them in the system anymore. You just want to use Flow instead, and you want to know when to use, before or after save flow and all that other stuff. So I created a very simple workflow rule here, just called field update, and it's intentionally ambiguous because this is probably how a lot of workflow rules are inside of your instance. But we've got a field update here. We don't know what it does. Like pretend someone made this, 5 years ago. And so I need to migrate all of this off over into Flow because I want to use best practice. So there is a migration tool. If you pop up into your workflow rule area or your process builder area, you click, what I just clicked back here, migrate your workflow rules to flows. And then you'll see all of the existing automation that can be moved to Flow. It'll pop it up here for you to select and work on them individually. So the thing I want to call out here is this: when I say individually, I really do mean individually. Like, you will only be able to choose one automation at a time. And then if y'all are used to using workflow rules, you may have used 6, 7, 8 to stamp stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So while you're doing this migration, you also want to think about, what can I basically like group into itself when I'm migrating into Flow. So in this case, if we're just doing, one-to-one, I'll show you what you shouldn't do here. And honestly, you shouldn't use this tool either, but I want to kind of show what it does. But we click here, we hit migrate to Flow, and then you'll see a spot, it'll pop up where we can, it'll say we can, immediately activate it, or we can go into Flow Builder and test. And that's what you want to do, is you want to go into Flow and test. And we'll share a new tab here. And then the first thing you'll notice is this is a single node flow. That's before save. So it doesn't tell me anything of what it does. So it just copies the name of the workflow rule. So on the upper left-hand corner, you see field update _4. I have no idea what that does. And so Eric's going to talk about nomenclature and how to actually name your flows. But I, first of all, don't even know what this does. Secondly, the entry criteria for this flow are very specific because it's just copying this workflow rule one-to-one. So we've got stage name equals prospecting. That's what it is. And then for us to figure out what it's actually doing, this node, it's called main update. Still don't know what that does. But if I click into it, I'll see, okay, wait, that's a 15, it's upgrading the amount field to 15K. If you have, and I'll go back to this, go back to the workflow rule page here. If your instance has 180 of these, and you just do that workflow rule migration tool for all 180, you're going to basically create a massive amount of tech debt. I actually call this tool the tech debt creator tool, because if you're using this to basically do automation migrations, you're going to create tech debt for yourself. It's going to be way harder for you in the future. And then you can group, most of the times, many workflow rules or process builders or processes as you're doing the migration. So that's basically the situation of what you don't want to do. You do want to think about what automation you're doing. You don't want to use this tool. I will say, though, that, and some people have brought this up to me before, that there is a positive to the workflow rule and the process builder migration tool into Flow. It's that if you are not familiar with Flow or workflows, if you're not familiar with Flow and doing the migration, and you actually migrate this, it's a good place to actually go and look to see how to build a flow. So in the case of date stamping or simple field updates, this is actually a pretty good example. And you want to probably consolidate a bunch of automations into this one, but this is for the most part how this would look. So this is a great way to also figure out and teach yourself how to use Flow in that sense. So if I didn't know anything about Flow, I'd be like, oh, solid. This is my workflow rule. This is how, the entry criteria works. This is how the update works. And you can begin to familiarize yourself with that over the course of time. So interesting stuff here. Don't use the tool. Use it if you want to learn. Think about what you're doing. And so the next question to this would be, what do I do next? So great. We realize we need to move from workflow rule to process builder. What do I do next? How do I actually do that efficiently? How do I project manage that? So we're going to share Sonar here. So I'm calling out Sonar because obviously Sonar, but very easy to show this in Sonar. But you can use Jira, Asana. You can use any project management tool, pen and paper, Google Sheets. But the big thing is, when we're thinking about what automation we want to migrate over, we want to be intelligent about what we're actually thinking about. So big place here. We'll go to data dictionary here, go to process builder. And I'm hooked into just a demo org. But we've got so many different process builders here. And so let's say Slack notifications and stage progression and task update account were 3 automations I know that are part of the same business process. What I want to do in my project management tool is I want to consolidate those into one single epic, or one single, in this case, initiative. So I have a demo one here that I'm going to add. And then if we go to our initiatives, it'll just show you what it looks like. But if I'm somebody that's migrating automation, I want to have a place where I can go that I can very, very easily say, this is my business process for this. Here are all of the process builders and workflow rules that are related to this business process. And then we can start iteratively working through all of these things and figuring out their complexity and scoping them out. And a cool tool with Sonar is this like little, I don't know if this is Chat GPT or what, but
Oh yeah, definitely a Chat
it's,
GPT.
yeah, if you hit the little icon here, the I don't know what that is, a light bulb.
Light bulb.
You it actually tells you what this automation does. So again, if you're trying to figure out your flow, you're trying to figure out what your automation is, this will help you too. But the big thing, the big takeaway is use a PM tool. Make sure you're thinking about what you're doing for this automation, what business processes this touches, and then be really smart about the migration. But also, you do want to move off of Workflow Rule and Process Builder ASAP. So very quickly. I mean, before 2024, because you're not going to be able to even work in those very soon. So that's that's the big thing there. I don't want to be the bad teacher, but essentially, that's
No,
yep.
that was perfect, man. I think the thing that we were talking about, I know, kind of been prepped for a lot of this, and when you were talking about some of the Chat GPT, OpenAI functionality that we had with it, internally here, we joke around. We know how bad my naming conventions are, and just how I'm terrible at copy in general. And so that was the biggest thing, purposely for me, was to be able to not have to make my own copy or write my own notes down. So, but you're spot on, and I'm with you. Write it down somewhere, document it in any capacity. Sonar's great. There are many tools out there. The more important part of that is you're going to go through this migration process a lot. And the last thing you want to do is really ask yourself, how did I do that yesterday or last week? Putting all this together in a concise place, you can make a repeatable pattern. Incredibly useful. So, yeah, that was fantastic. I really appreciate it. All right, everybody, buckle up, Mr. Lopez. I'm more or less turn this one over to you now.
Oh
Kick us
God,
off.
Matt did such a good job, and I feel like a bumbling idiot after a really great circus sideshow. So, to give you to preface a little bit of this, one of the big thing that I'm going to be talking about is how do you consistently make your flows, i.e., all the metadata of your flows, work for you, so that when you come back to it 6 months later, you're not like, huh, I forgot about that, or geez, where is this located? Or more importantly, especially if you looked at my LinkedIn, if you only stay at a place for like, oh, I don't know, a year at a time, and you have to give an org to someone else, how do you make it so that you don't have to do any work the last 2 weeks of your stay at a job? So that way, if they ask you for documentation, you already did it way ahead of hand. That is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So you've made your flows, and now you're starting to see a bevy of flows. You started out with one, you have five, it's 6 months later, and you have about 50, and you now have to manage all of those. What do you do to keep it all straight? So one of the things you have to think about right from the very beginning is, what are your naming conventions? What are your field conventions? What are your node conventions? This further on down the line will help you a ton, and it will also help you think through stuff like the bigger question of flows is, do I have one mega flow, or do I have several different smaller ones? So one of the first things off the bat, and I'm going to give you an example of what you should be doing, but as long as you do something, and more importantly, you do it consistently, that's really the end goal. So when I create flows, one of the things that I do is I like to think about it in terms of process and less in terms of what is it doing. And so if you haven't done this already, maybe one of the things you should start off with is doing a customer journey mapping, which, to give a shout out to James MacArthur and fellow people that are in here, he'll be talking about that later on in another Shops Talk. But that's a good way to start conceptualizing what it is that you need to automate and how you would go about doing that. Second, what I do is when I go to make an actual flow, I usually title it with the object that starts it, dash its context, is it after save, before save, and then kind of give an idea of the name of the process and try to kind of number them. So if it's an initiator of a process, that'll be number one. If I create subflows that are used in it, I would then put in something at the very beginning of the title, like a parent that says subflow, and then points to the main flow that it actually gets called from, so forth and so on. This helps me kind of understand when I look at something like Flow Trigger Explorer, which if you aren't using that, you definitely should, to kind of see how many after save, before saves, and then as I go further along making more flows, do I need to consolidate? Do I need to turn a before save into an after save, so forth and so on. So this kind of helps it so that you can quickly organize your flows, because as you look into the actual Flow UI, there's not a really good way to do any list views or anything. So until that moment comes, actually spending the time coming up with a consistent naming convention will definitely help you in the long run. The second thing I go
Totally.
ahead and do is, you know, that once you make a flow, it just doesn't, you don't set it and forget it. You're going to be making constant tweaks and changes, so forth and so on. And so in the description, I use the ISO 8601 date standard to then go ahead and give a full description of what it is that I made and calling out any kind of particularities. Like, am I calling out custom metadata? Is this part of an integration call out? Do I need to do anything like that? And then every time I make a significant update to the flow, I then do the same date timestamp, say what it is that I changed, and then continue on my way. I also give myself notes such as, this is a horrible piece of shit flow. I need to refactor it later on. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Those type of things that will help me come back to it later on.
Yeah, you
So,
can see some of Eric's naming conventions and flows right here in his presentation. If you haven't actually clicked into the link on the screen or in the chat, here is a lot of the his prettiness,
It's,
like he likes to call it. So.
I mean, you can also put just like, I've put why in some of my stuff. Like when I review it later too, it's like, why did I do this? I don't know. I was a smarter man at that time, I guess.
yeah.
So
And if you guys
I
have
don't
been
know.
looking in the chat, if you've been looking in the chat, Vinny has posted a really good naming convention thing there. And also with new flow updates that have happened, I think in this last update or maybe one prior, when you put in descriptions into your nodes and into your decisions, there's a little pop out that you can hover over and it will automatically show you what's in the description. That helps a ton. And I think now it is really worth its weight in gold to actually start putting some really good descriptions in there. And I would, if I had to be a betting man and start kind of stack ranking where I would put descriptions, decision nodes are number one. If you're putting, you know, I would put at the very bottom of that my get records. You really don't necessarily need to put a description in your get records as long as your label is pretty straightforward, like get all accounts that are worth doing a big deal alert. So stuff like that. So that's
Big.
kind of
Tell us a
the,
little bit more about Big Deal Alert, Eric. I'm kidding.
oh, that is probably my favorite flow automation that's not part of Flow that I wish would be its own separate like mini flow. So if you're in an org and you go into setup, and sorry, this is a small detour that's worth the detour, and you type in Big Deal Alert, that is the first automation that you should set, and you should also connect it with Slack and also send it to the CEO's email.
Every
Those
time.
are all things. Every time, 100%. So
Every time. I love it.
yeah.
Super helpful, Eric. In all seriousness, if you haven't, and again, we've put it in a link, excuse me, in the chat, definitely jump into Eric's presentation. It looks like right now there's about 20 people in there. So everybody's checking out your work right now and very much grading your poor grammar.
Just highlight his
But,
typos. Highlight his typos. They're probably numerous.
Do
exactly.
it before tomorrow at 9
Exactly.
a.m. Pacific time,
Yep.
please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Exactly. Perfect. I was trying to help you out there, get you some proofreading.
Don't delete my slides. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. All right, Justin, I'm going to toss it over to you. I think one of the cool things that you want to talk about and kind of go through a little bit of live demos, certainly talking about extending flows. We'll start there, but I'm going to pass the mic over to you and let you educate us.
Awesome. So I'm just going to give everybody a disclaimer. I'm extremely awkward when I present things. I just can't help it. So if you think Eric was fun, get ready. So we all decided that we wanted to talk about extending flows and what tools you can use in order to do that. And so everybody has been hollering about unofficialsf.com. I am probably a huge user, one of the hugest users in the world of unofficial SF, because, you know, I could probably learn how to do Visual Force, but why should I when somebody else has put in the work? So what I'm going to do is I'm show you a flow that I created for a nonprofit that I am working with that utilizes a couple different unofficial SF items that enhances the flow experience. Because ultimately, when you're doing, especially when you're doing screen flows, you really want the UI to be a good experience for those users. So, just a little backstory. This nonprofit went through two different consulting companies before I volunteered to be their sole admin and implementator. And uh, basically, they do programs for people that are trying to become more self-sufficient with their lives, be it financial, health, etc. And so what I was able to do was basically create this awesome assessment that they're able to basically it's a matrixed assessment that grades it, scores it, and then they're able to do follow-up actions on it. So I should probably share my screen.
Yeah, jump in there.
Let's see. There we go. All righty.
There we go. Give
You
me
can
one
see it all
second
right?
and I'll update it. Good to go. It's on. Go
Okay,
for it.
fantastic. So, so we're in the sandbox, and basically, I'm going to go ahead and do a new assessment. And the first item that I put in here is actually from Salesforce Labs, and this is the dynamic flow something. I can't remember what it's called. I'll drop a link for it. But what you're able to do is for each of your screens, you're able to put a category on it, which is really cool. So I'm able to go through and um, segment each of my sections, and it really makes it for a better user experience. Don't mind the duplicates here. Probably should have QA'd this beforehand. Um, there's nothing like a live demo. I love live
I love
demos. So,
it.
but the good thing,
I love this.
the most important thing is that we've got our user experience where they're able to be talking to their clients, asking them questions, and it grades it and scores it at the back end. So once we get done with that, I'm able to say, okay, we're in our review, and it has actually scored it based on scores that I have listed in a custom object. So I'm also using a custom object that has all of the questions, the scores, and then it creates a scoring model. Basically, it went through and it scored. This is the second section. So this is using the unofficial Salesforce data table. And it basically took all of my answers and it gave me a level based on what that answer was. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in case plan, start date, and then end date. And it's going to go ahead and go on to the next step. So this is where we're going to introduce the third portion. And that is a rich text input that has character count. You're able to insert images, any sort of text. So what I'm doing, and here's where it gets fun because I'm using a loop in the background on this, basically saying how many number of goals do I want to do, and then because I did not do the correct method, I have now just messed up my entire thing. So what would have happened is if I would have actually utilized the data table correctly and selected a couple of those would then come up in my pick list choice set here. So thankfully, that is not a required field in my demo environment. But what I can do using this rich text is go ahead and set goals. And I can put in some italics and even go into some numbering. And then it's going to go through, and here's going to be my second one. I'm going to go ahead and put my completion date, and I can do a different color if I want to. This one, oops, I have to actually select it. Can you all tell that I'm nervous when I do demos? It's just fantastic.
Not at all. This is great.
This is really cool. Like this,
And then
yeah.
I click next, and what it's done is we can now see here is my new case plan. It's got all of my information here. It says it has that I've created 2 actions. This is my overall vulnerability score. And then my related items are right here, my actions. So I'm able to go in, say that I've completed my goals. And if I wanted to, I could even, go in and put in an action saying, okay, it is done as long as I put the date in. And now it's updated and it says that I'm at 50%.
Nice.
So with this, we've been able to show the 3 different extendable portions using screen flows, really to make that UI experience great for the user.
And this is all
That's
flow too.
fantastic.
It's not
It's
coding or
all
anything.
flow.
Yep.
No coding.
That's wild to me because some of this stuff is just it's so interesting. Like you seeing it and seeing how people use it is just it's awesome. This is very good, by the way. It's very
Thank
good.
you. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
it's fantastic, Justin. I know. I believe one of the next things you wanted to take a look at too was the utility bar. Is that right?
So I did, and I did not do that, but I've got another one that is, I've got a backup plan. So the
There we
other
go.
thing is, where in the world can you use screen flows, right? You can use them anywhere. So here I'm in a demo environment that I did. I don't have a utility belt, Eric. But we're in a demo environment that I created for another webinar. But basically, if you have a sandbox and you're having to do tests a lot, and you just really need to be able to create really fast records, just create a screen flow. So this is for a specific use case. So this is for competitors. So if I wanted to do, again, it's utilizing that, and let me bump up my zoom here.
There you go. Perfect.
It's utilizing, again, another loop. So I can go in and competitor 1, put in any info. And then I think I put in that I was going to do 3 of them. I just forgot how to spell competitor for a minute. And so now it goes through, it creates the records. So now I can go in here, and here they are in my competitor object. Now, why did I create this entire process? Well, it is to go in and track my competition on opportunities utilizing a screen flow that is actually surfaced directly on the opportunity. Now, what I do is I do a very basic screen at the very beginning. And that is just so it's not always kind of triggering, trying to pull information. But what it does do is that it does a count. So it's telling me that there's currently 5 competitors associated with the opportunity. What I can do is I can either do an edit or an add. I'm going to go ahead and do an add. I'm going to, and again, I can add a new competitor. I can say it's going to be that one. I can tell that it's the incumbent, and then put in any notes. So that's really going to help with competitor tracking. You can do it with feature tracking if you're a SaaS company. Hopefully this doesn't error out. So what this is doing, it's again using a junction object along with the competitor object to create a record. So what it just did was it created this guy here, just basically saying that this has been all associated, and then on my competitor object, it relates it down there. So I'm able to really go in, and if I wanted to, which sometimes I do, I can go ahead and do a report and say, hey,
Oh, interesting.
Actually look
and
up
of
like,
course, it's not going to show anything. So that's the great thing about live demos, y'all, is
yep.
so, but you get the drift. So rather
Yeah.
than, James MacArthur's favorite thing to do is build multi-select pick lists. And so,
Big
I
fan. He's a
try
big
and tell him, dude, just do a custom object with a junction, and then you can do all sorts of different types of reporting. So
I
someday he'll
love it.
learn, I think.
Yeah,
But
we've all been
for
trying
now,
to train him for years, Justin. I'm not going to
I
say
know.
it's a lost cause, but man, we've been trying.
So
I'm picking on you, Justin.
I,
Go ahead,
I
Matt.
I like this a lot. I think this is interesting too. The first one was really cool. This piece is nuanced with junction objects. It's good stuff.
Mhm. Totally. The one thing I was going to ask, and I know there's a thread in WizOps about this, a lot of how screen flows can work, and the way that we're using flows in general is to create that user experience that is very tight, very narrow, so that we can keep that data strategy alignment and keep the data integrity alive. How do y'all think about that in conjunction, in partnership with things like validation rules, which we all know are built to do that exact same thing? It was a really good thread, so I don't want to steal it under, but I want to
Yeah.
see how y'all think about that.
Eric, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Take it.
All right. Here's my thought on this, and it's just a thought. I think when it comes to like data, when it comes to data validation, as an ex rep, it's like I hated everything that had to do with data entry. And so the more validation rules you put in, you're going to cause your reps to just do nothing, literally nothing. And so if you put in a billion validation rules, awesome. You're going to have excellent data if anybody ever fucking uses it. Nobody is going to use it if you have too many validation rules. And I feel so strongly about this because I've seen so many times that I go into an org and there's like 17 validation rules on an opportunity object. And they're like, nobody uses the opportunity, nobody does anything. Why? And it's like, maybe our process is bad. It's like, no, your process is good. It's just that there's too many validation rules in there. So I think if you have a very narrow process like what Justin is doing, you're not really doing validations. What you're doing is you're guiding people straight through the flow, and it's making it so that they really can't not give you the right data because one, it looks
Mhm.
great, it's fun, it's awesome,
Yes.
and then also it's just like it's asking you for the right stuff at the right time. Like it's definitely one of those things where like Justin doesn't need validation rules because he's built that screen flow and that process perfectly to where it's just going to do it for you. So that's kind of my thought process on it. Don't use validation rules to the extent of like 18, but maybe a couple, but that's it.
And
Totally.
that's really why I love using screen flows, even bypassing the typical, new button and making a screen flow to create your opportunity or create your lead or what have you, because you're able to, everybody knows there are 50 fields standard on all of those. And, who wants to keep scrolling up and down to find which ones are required and what do I need to do? Just do it as a flow, because then, like Matt said, you're able to guide them, get exactly the correct information, and split it into different paths based on how they answer it. So whether it be a partner deal, a non-partner deal, enterprise, mid-market, you're asking the right questions at the right time.
Yep. Justin or
Totally.
Eric, you have the same thought. Yeah,
I hate validation rules. It's just
they're the worst.
You're chugging along and then
They're the worst.
Yep, I love it. All right, we've got a few minutes. Actually, plenty of time for Q&A. I know we've got some great questions in there. We're going to start with Rochelle's. And I'm going to throw it on the screen for everybody so we can get the context for it. Matt, I think this might be queued up
Mhm.
beautifully for you, but can you explain again the best way to use the migrator tool? I know you and I talked a lot about this kind of in preparation for today, but this is a
Yep.
great question for the audience.
Yeah, we'll go right back here, and I'll just share my screen again. I think that the the number one thing is you should not use the migrator tool. But if you're trying to learn flow, or you're trying to see like under the hood what's happening with a process builder or a workflow rule, you can use that as an example to kind of like dive into the automation and figure out what's going on. So if you have to use this, then I just did it again, but I'll show you here. Like this would be a good way for you to figure out what's the best way to build a flow, or a good enough way to build a flow to start bringing in multiple automations into a single flow. But I would really honestly urge against it. I would try to think about really what you're doing with your automation, and think about what needs to migrate, think about the business processes, actually put some project management together for it, and then think and really like be I guess deliberate with what you're trying to put together. So yeah, TLDR, don't use it, but if you have to, use it as a learning experience.
I love it. I love it. Great question, Rochelle. All right, we're gonna pick on our real good friend James MacArthur. We know him, we love him, but we are gonna answer his question. How do you how would you use custom metadata types in flows, and what about custom settings?
Oh,
Okay, I'll take this. All right,
I
too late.
I can lay up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a good example of using custom metadata are things that you will have to update constantly where you don't want to update the flow, you just want to update certain data points. An idea like this would be kind of like a calculation engine or a deal matrix, right? Like I do this now where every quarter we have to update like how much is the cost per video for something, and the flow will do all the calculations. And so all I have to do is update the value of that for the quarter, and that's it. And then I never have to touch the automation. So custom metadata is good
Yeah.
for that. So
Um, for some of our clients, we use custom metadata in a similar way, where like if you have a static value, like I don't know, currency conversion or whatever, you always want it to be 1.25 or whatever, you can reference the custom metadata table for that custom metadata object basically to pull the value of like whatever your reps or your ops people put in as like whatever you need that value to be. Sounds a little convoluted and confusing, but it's like basically a way of doing VLOOKUP. Um, that's really the best example I can put there. Like I have static values. I want to call them eventually, like what is value A? And then it's going to go to custom metadata and then look at whatever you input for value A. And then you can use it across multiple flows. And you don't have to change the flow when you change that value. You just change the value in the custom metadata table. That's a really tricky one though. And I think MacArthur, you asked that to throw us for a loop because that's a very, very hard one.
He may or may not do those sort of things on purpose. We'll never know. Oh, I love it. We got some great questions here. We're going to keep firing away. Sri asked a really good question. Does flow affect the performance of the system? All of our system architects right now. Answers go. Eric.
yeah, it does. Yeah, the biggest thing to be kind of aware of is the fact that before saves are going to be really, really performant, and then after save is just going to be a little bit more costly, right? And then you want to throw in your scheduled flows and whatnot. The biggest thing to kind of consider is at what point in any particular process are these things firing, so that you're not firing multiple things and then all of a sudden kind of losing track of the thread of your automations.
Yep.
You know, and so you want those things to be very carefully architected. I touched a little bit upon this when I said, hey, you should use Flow Trigger Explorer. So one of the use cases for using it is to see like, hey, what is the order in which these things fire? And how many of them do I have? And so when you look at the order, if you go into advanced, when you click on properties on a flow, there's a little place where you can set the trigger order and move them up or down in the order. And the best practice for that is to do that in increments of 10 or 20, so that if you have to make a flow and slot it in, you don't have to all of a sudden go back and change the number on all the ones that are in there. So I love performance.
That's a really good point.
I love performing. So it does perfect performance.
He does love performing.
I was gonna crack a joke too. My flows don't affect performance at all because they're so good. So,
I mean, we all know that. Humble brag.
that,
Humble
no,
brag.
actually,
No doubt.
that's completely false. I put together some stuff that's wild. So
I love it. All right, this one's going to get everybody excited because we're getting the one question from Aquaman himself. And if you don't know that reference, you are clearly not deep enough into the WizOps threads like everybody else. But our good friend Vinny, Justin, I'm probably going to tee you up for this one since you and Vinny work so closely together. But how do you handle your flow faults? Each flow gets their own, or throw into a repeat subflow?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a hard pass. I don't want to show, any sort of, favoritism to what VDog has taught me, good or bad.
That's fair.
So, Eric, what do you do?
don't pass it to me.
I don't use faults.
I was about to say the same thing. It's unfortunate. Hey, look, Fezza, close earmuffs. I don't totally use faults, but we do use them if like we know it's a trigger point that's gonna fail often enough. We do create fault paths, and then sometimes fault paths like rerun through the flow and then like go a different direction. We should be using fault paths more often, and the subflow piece is a good idea, but yeah, it's something that it's often we just don't, and we should do it more, honestly. Everyone on this call for sure.
I don't for a very particular reason, because usually my flows, I just need to check for particular outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think and plan far enough ahead, there is no reason for a fault. Like, it either fails gracefully and nothing changes and the end user doesn't need to know, or it finds it and it continues on its way. There's very rarely a time where I need to surface that to myself and be like, what the hell happened? And that rare time has been zero.
If it's customer facing or end user facing, and you know it's going to be a screen flow that's like gonna show up some kind of like weird Apex validation error or something like that, you probably should put a fault path in there to just make it cleaner of what they're seeing and deliver the screen or something. But that's typically what we do, and we remember to do them for sure. And to Eric's point, like sometimes these, like, the automation is complex, but it really only has one output, and that's it does its thing it's supposed to do. And if it breaks outside of that, like, that's something larger we have to take a look at.
Got it. I will switch gears real quick. That was a great, almost loaded triggering question, Vinny, which I know he probably did it very much on purpose. But speaking of subflows, go to our good friend Kanako. Can you share any tips of how you use subflows? Eric just got super excited.
Yes. So my big architectural thing that I like to talk to people about is, going back to the very beginning of this whole conversation, is, do you create one mammoth process? Or do you split it up? And if you split it up, how do you split it up? I'm definitely in the camp of more is better, less is worse. Because when you have like Flow Trigger Explorer, you have before and after save flows. You can do as many as you want. And when it comes to performance, it's not going to make a thing. And it's easier to maintain if you do subflows. So now the real question is, okay, when do I use it? You use it when you think about processing and you think about how unwieldy it is to maintain, and you kind of split it out that way. And I want to go back to the example of the calculation engine. And the org that I'm currently running, this calculation engine comes into play when we're at an opportunity and we add a product. And depending on the product and the price book, my main flow, all it does is route it to the correct subflow. And then the subflow then takes care of everything. And then if I need to, I'll put it back into the main flow. And it keeps things cleaner and consistent as well. So when you think about your processes, and again, this comes back to the very beginning of your design, when you think about flow, don't do it to address a business need. Think about it in terms of the entire end-to-end experience and what it is that you're trying to get to from point A to point B. And it's going to traverse many different objects. And then you can split up your process into variable chunks. But then it keeps things even more organized when you go back to say, hey, I have an account thing that's going on. What part of the process is this at, and what is it doing at that point? So, yeah,
Right.
That's the main reason.
There you go. We've got about 8-ish minutes left. And again, keep the questions coming. We're going to run this thing all the way to the top of time. Go ahead, Matt.
It looks like there's a couple of like best resource to learn flow.
Yep. I was
Yeah.
just about to add that. Yeah, Chris asked. It looked like I think Pat might have asked too. I put one link in here just for order of operations. We were talking about that anyway in the prep set of this. This actually links out to Salesforce Ben. I'm sure everybody is super familiar with Ben. Good friend of mine. I was actually emailing with him today with Spencer, and so definitely check out Ben's website. We're great partners with him, and I can't wait to see him out in San Francisco in a few, coming on weeks now for Dreamforce. But yeah, guys, what do y'all think on your best resources? What do you have pinned in your favorites bar? What do you have in your catalog that you always go to?
Oh, this is a tough question because it's been a while since I was looking at resources. Salesforce Ben for sure. What was it? Salesforce Flowsum, I believe. It's another really good one. Reddit is a very good place to go. Like the Salesforce subreddit is a great place to go for learning flow. You can actually ask people there. And honestly, the community, just like in general, RevOps people, just asking people on LinkedIn or asking people in Slack and WizOps or whatever, like, hey, how do I do this? Is a really good way to learn. But the Flowsum, Salesforce Ben, and then Reddit are probably the three that I was always going for that stuff. And every once in a while, you find a YouTube video. That's a pretty good example of what to do as well.
Totally. Justin, what you
Automation
got?
Champion. Automation Champion has been a good one because it breaks out the use cases and things like that.
I love that. All right, I'm going to ask, I'm going to just kind of randomly click on what Josh asked. Really good tools tips for mapping and coordinating triggers and flows and Apex. We've run into issues where a flow is coming into conflict with Apex or vice versa. When you think about troubleshooting that and just really, kind of manage it in general, what comes to mind, guys?
I wrote Josh a huge thing in the chat if you follow the last couple things, but the biggest thing here is to actually look at your automation architecture, because usually when you run into that, what is really happening is that stuff hasn't, your general automation architecture hasn't been looked at and adjusted for where Salesforce is at now. If this was like a year or 2 years ago, I would have given the general recommendation of like, hey, just make like do a performance profile and then shift your flow somewhere and don't touch your Apex. Now I'm like, actually take a look at your Apex, switch it to flow, and get
Yes.
rid of as much Apex as possible.
Yes.
So there's two trains of thoughts here when it comes to an automation architecture. Some people make a very extreme case to say, hey, once you introduce code to an object, like an account, for instance, you always do all your automation in code so that you avoid that. And then the other end of that is the same thing. Like if it starts with declarative, keep it declarative as much as possible. I'd kind of strike a balance in the middle where there are very, very few exceptions where you want to introduce code, and that's going to be stuff around like bulkification, scheduling, scheduled jobs, integration callouts. But that's really about it. If you can get away with it with Flow, that's probably going to be your best bet, both in terms of maintenance and in terms of keeping your performance profile down. So probably not the answer you want to hear in terms of trying to balance it. Like, hey, go ahead and go back and refactor it. Spend about four of your cycles doing that or whatever. But in the long run, taking 2 steps back will make you go 6 steps
Yes.
forward.
Especially with the power of flow too. Like I don't want to say it necessarily completely eliminates the need of Apex, but it does take the place of Apex in a lot of ways and maintains the performance there. The big benefit is you can get non-devs to be able to update and take a look at this automation. So even if you lose a little bit of performance over the Apex version of what you're trying to create, you're gaining a lot in terms of time savings over the course of time with just people being able to triage that in the future. It's really that's a tough one though. I mean, we run into that a lot with clients, and I think that's going to be a problem for everybody, at some point or another in their career. So that's a tough one.
Totally. All right, I'm going to get one more out there. Good friend Rob. I can't say enough good things about Rob Walter, but just your general thoughts and criteria about using validation rules. I know we talked about that a little bit on the ScreenFlow side, but just in general, working with flows and validation rules at the same time, just some general guidance. Eric, don't use validation rules is what he's going to say.
your process should be good enough to where you shouldn't need them. And there are small cases where you absolutely do need to validate something, maybe at the end of a close won process where you have to have certain information to close win the deal. But that's like my general rules. We tried not to use validation rules unless you have somebody who's just really needs them for whatever reason. And then we try to build a process that guides you in a way that, like Justin showed earlier, that will completely eliminate the need for that. It's kind of like my thought on it, at least.
The only reason to ever use I will now speak highly of validation rules. The only time you would ever want to make sure that you have a validation rule against something is if the data is needed in an external system in a particular way, and if you screw that up, you screwed up a ton of things. But people should know that way ahead of time. Like, that should be the end of the line as far as you go. You know, other than that, like, yeah.
You can validate on the external system too.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. All right, rapid fire last one. We're just going to see who gets this one first. What is the order of execution for before save flows?
Before save flows
is more of like a quiz.
Step 3. It's step 3. Yeah, it's step 3.
Step 3.
There you go.
Before Apex triggers.
Yeah. So it checks to make sure that everything in the system is actually correct. Like, are things fitting? And then it's like, hey, there's before save.
You bypass validation rules with before save flows too. So it's another way to like put your validation rule in, but allow the system or whatever, the automation, to bypass that, so you can maybe fill it out later or something. The sneaky trick.
Totally. I love it. I love it. We got about 90 seconds left, and so that's where we have to spend a lot of time asking or answering Eric's own question about why are Justin's flows putting him to shame. No, we will not do that. But most importantly, man, if we wrap up with about a minute, don't cry, Eric. It's okay. It's okay. You can learn from Justin. Y'all can Slack after this in WizOps. Y'all can set up some more time to learn.
I love that face.
As we wrap, I know everybody's probably thinking about getting to the top of the hour with their next calls. I'm going to put these in one more time just for everybody to be able to connect with our flow experts. One thing particularly that Matt and I were both talking about is how do we make this much more routine, almost on a monthly basis. There's so much to learn and so much changing when it comes to flows and just the automations and architecture and Salesforce in general. We always want to stay a step ahead of the game, and we always want to be supporting our community with that. And so we are going to start working on perhaps some monthly cadences here that we can start getting more folks in. If you want to present, let me know. I love moderating. That's the fun part about this. So I love bringing more and more folks into it. But please let us know. Most importantly, if you're not in our community already, please jump in. That's where all the fun's happening. We're going to talk DC versus Marvel a lot more starting in the next 20 seconds, I'm sure, along with other fun topics. But gentlemen, again, I can't thank you enough. Eric on the road, being the road warrior in a random library in Nevada. Gosh, Matt, Justin, thank you all so much for jumping in. Can't thank you all enough. Parting words for the community. I'll let you all say it.
DM me on WizOps. I love helping. I know I work for a consultancy, but I'll never try to sell you on our services, and I'll always try to help you. So in the sense that, like, it's just personally fulfilling. So if you find me on WizOps or LinkedIn DM, whatever, you need help with a flow, you need help with just brainstorming reports, whatever, reach out. I'd love to hear from you and help you out.
Usually it's just incremental.
Always use checkboxes where a date timestamp will do.
Jesus Christ.
Of course. Justin, final thoughts.
Yeah, definitely reach out. Again, I also work for a consultancy, but I can't promise that I won't try and sell you something. It just depends on what Vinny's mood is that day. So just be prepared.
I love it.
Definitely reach out.
Absolutely. As always, please, folks, reach out and WizOps. That's exactly why we have this community and why we all carve time out of our day to make sure that we got the answers that we need. So, gentlemen, can't thank you all enough for all the great knowledge drops that you had. No more check boxes, Eric, please. And we will see everybody soon. Stay tuned for some fun updates. We're going to be on the road heading out to Dreamforce in a month and a half now, I think, is the time frame. So stay tuned for some fun and exciting things we'll be doing. Thanks again for welcome. Always keeping our webinar up and running and making it super interactive. And again, gentlemen, thank you all for joining.
Cool.
Have a great rest of your afternoon. Talk soon.